Imagine this is you. You're standing in front of a large crowd, all of them looking at you. Do your palms get sweaty? Does your heart rate increase? This is the stress response that many students at SEL starting from freshman year have to deal with. As seniors, we wanted to help them deal with this stress, which is why we found out that 478 breathing method decreases heart rate in high school freshman students during public speaking. This led to our research question and hypothesis, which is, what is the difference in stress levels during a presentation using a set of designed procedures aimed to reduce stress? Our hypothesis was that 478 would have a positive effect towards the student and in turn make them less stressed when they present. So what is 478 breathing? It is a technique developed by Dr. Andrew Weil and has been known to reduce stress, help people fall asleep, and more. It is very simple, only having 3 steps, making it very easy to teach, which relates to why it was focused on. So we also hope that the stress relieving techniques of 478 could also be effective while presenting.
Also, the 478 breathing method activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which in return deactivates the sympathetic nervous system that is in charge of the stress response. The activation of the parasympathetic nervous system slows down heart rate, relaxes breathing, and overall promotes a state of relaxation through the release of acetylcholine. Methods. We used InstaPulse handheld heart rate monitors to obtain 3 different heart rate measurements of the participants, one being 3 days before the presentation in order to get the resting heart rate, another right before the presentation started, and the last one after the presentation ended. We calculated the increase of heart rate by subtracting the heart rate measurement right before the presentation minus the resting heart rate. We used such number from each individual to get an average increased heart rate for each group, which would then be used for comparison. As mentioned, this comparative study consisted of 2 groups of participants that consisted of a control and experimental group in a 9th grade accelerated English course. The control group, which was period 3, did not learn about the set of procedures, but instead used what they already did to practice for a presentation, whereas the experimental group, which was period 8, learned and practiced the breathing method for a week. Also, the participants filled out 2 surveys which asked for outside variables that affected heart rate, a self-evaluation of their presentation skills and stress, and their opinion for breathing method, which was only asked to the experimental group.
Leads into our results. The first data we took was the resting heart rate of all of our students, the blue being the control group and the red being the experimental group. So when we look at the graph, we notice that there's a very wide range of resting heart rates. What this means is that students have different resting heart rates, which is normal because people generally have different resting heart rates due to working out and other physical health factors. We wanted to make sure we took this into account, so we took survey data to understand why the resting heart rates could have varied. Things like caffeine or other heart rate stimulants were taken into account when taking our survey. We also made sure to ask if they believed they were physically fit and other factors led to this difference in heart rate between students. So the next piece of thing we looked at was the change in heart rate in each participant in the control group. So for this, we discovered that when we added all of the differences in heart rate between all 12 participants, that the change in heart rate was about 18 beats per minute. What this means is that, on average, each participant, when they present, is increasing their heart rate by 18 beats per minute. Next piece of data we took was the experimental group's change in heart rate in relation to hours practiced of 478 breathing. So the x-axis in this graph is the hours practiced of 478 breathing in terms of hours. What we noticed first of all was that there was a wide range of hours practiced between our students, with most of them lying around the 1 hour range, and one student lying at 40 hours. Another trend we noticed was that the experimental group's change in heart rate, on average, was much lower than the control group's change in heart rate. On average, we noticed that the change in heart rate in our experimental group was 11 beats per minute, which is 7 beats per minute lower than the control group. This suggests that 478 breathing method has an effect on the stress levels of students while presenting. This effect being that it lowers the stress response of students when they practice.
We conducted a 2-tails t-test analysis using a p-value of less than 0.05, which is commonly used by scientists, and we discovered that there is a statistically significant difference between the 2 samples of the experimental group and control group. Therefore, our results were not attributed to chance, but rather, with a confidence level of 95%, we will get the same results 95% or more of the times.
So that leads us into our conclusion and next steps. So what can be changed in the future in our experiment? Well, we could use more accurate heart rate measuring tool, a larger sampling size, and an increased duration of learning the set of procedures. These changes could improve the experiment immensely and make the results much more accurate. We could even use, in the future, this 478 breathing technique in a school scenario. This study showed that there are positive benefits, which suggests that schools could implement 478 to help with stress. So for next steps, potentially we could present the results to school in support of implementing the use of the brain method and design procedures that we created in this experiment.
Thank you.